Dr. Crow, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for making the time.
Yes, happy to be here.
And I know your time is limited. So we'll just have a few questions, but I think get right to the point. Tenacross is built on the idea that this is the new America, from California to Florida, cities like Phoenix, which, as you even said in your inaugural address, were on the frontier of social, cultural, and political issues. To announce that when you're arriving here 20 years ago, what has surprised you about that decision to be here and what you found, and what has not?
Well, I mean, the surprising thing in a positive sense is this openness to new ideas, this openness to this new America notion. The entire motto, our model of the university, both motto and model, is the new American university, this place where cultures come together, this place where you're not building from the social structures of England or Europe. You're designing cities in a new kind of post-ethnic way. All of that has proven to be unbelievably empowering. And then on top of that, and this would be true probably for all the states cutting across from Florida to the edge of California, and that is that those states are more politically similar than California is to the rest. And what I mean by that is, in those states, it's still, the notion of small government, the notion of what Ezra Klein in his new book, Abundance, is talking about, this way of trying to get things done, move more quickly, make things happen. And so what you have now in this sort of the new land of opportunity, if you will, and that's what America used to be thought of as, you still have places where things can happen quickly. And it doesn't mean that there doesn't have to be judiciousness or careful consideration of ideas. It's just the other thing that proved to be the case here in Phoenix was absolutely that was the case.
So when you said used to be thought of, we'll come back to that because we've got some turbulence going on now. It probably then doesn't surprise you that when Jeffrey Goldberg and George Packer were looking for the most American city to profile in a full issue of the Atlantic, that one, all of their choices were in the Tenacross region, and they finally landed on Phoenix because it has everything you just suggested, as well as some of the complexities of the moment. Environmental.
So when you live in a place where there's not a strict political hierarchy that's been in place for some period of time, and where there aren't elite colleges and universities that take the sons and daughters of elite people that live in that region and have for 400 years or 300 years or 200 years, it means then that the complexity is that the nature of a power elite is very different. The big city political machines of New York or Boston or Philadelphia or Chicago, they don't exist in Phoenix. And so those kinds of politics don't exist. And those kind of politics, as we learned in Robert Caro's book, The Power Broker, about Robert Moses, those are powerful, powerful things. And so here, it really is government by committee and government by process, and at the same time still trying to move quickly. And so the complexity here is, there is no preconceived notion of what the role of government is. There is no preconceived notion of what of anything. So the city governments in Arizona are nonpartisan. They have a strong mayor and a strong city manager. So they're a dual model. There's no partisanship. There's no partisan elections in the city councils.
So let's take those observations and attach them to something for which you've been noted about lately, which has the role of technology. Even in your inaugural address, you said every year, 60 to 70% of the economic growth is driven by technological advances. And since 1990, nearly all major technological advances have been driven by fundamental academic scientific discovery. And in the viral video of you talking about your cell phone, which suggested that the public doesn't understand the value that universities have provided to make such things possible.
Because everybody thinks that this iPhone 16 is the product of the genius, and he was a genius, of Steve Jobs. Hardly. There were probably, by my estimation, 5,000 academic research groups through the decades that had something to do with the technology I'm holding in my hand. Nobody even knows they exist. Nobody knows the hundreds of patents that are in here and the thousands of articles that back up the patents that are in here. And I'm not just talking about the chips, the billions of transistors that are on the single chip, but the Gorilla Glass that's on the cover here, and the Surface this, and the electronic this, and the battery technology, and all the other kinds of things, and then all the systems and all the applications. There's not one aspect of this iPhone 16 which has not been deeply empowered and enabled by, at one point or another, some academic research activity, some academic technological development, and no one knows any of that.
Talk about that and how we might apply technology to the circumstances here.
Well, so obviously we have to build cities now where, we're not going to have better healthcare because we produce 20,000 more doctors a month. We're not going to have better health outcomes in big cities because we're producing more nurses or doctors. I mean, you can look at the major cities where that isn't happening. And so what we need is more technological capability to expand the ability to deliver public services, to expand the delivery of health services, to increase the efficiency of education. So it turns out that the two big sectors that are contrary to innovativeness driven by technology are education and healthcare. So how can we find a way in those two sectors to greatly accelerate technological assimilation in these communities where we can find ways to be of greater service, greater impact, greater health outcomes, greater educational attainment, greater economic development, greater economic adaptability, all of which could be driven by the conceptualization of the city as something other than a place where you build 14 hospitals for every 1 million people, and those 14 hospitals have to have this many doctors. And so that kind of infrastructure, that kind of system, that's not going to work. It hasn't worked in the past as effectively as people had hoped, and it's not going to obviously work in the future.
And those two big sectors, health, healthcare, and education, you're right, have been laggards or so massive in their construction, very difficult to change. Your conceptualization of a medical school, which we are going to build, is going to start with engineering, which is already a different mode of thinking. But when it comes to education as well, you have not shied away a bit about using technology. You were even pressing that case back in the 90s. So AI and other things you are all in on. So let's talk about, just for a second, the role of technology to enhance access to education, the quality of that education, and the benefit to students.
Well, I mean, we have only about half the people that go to college in the U.S. graduate. So we have huge problems with completion. Most of the people that want to go to college can't go to college. Most of the people that want continuing education after high school can't find it. And so we have huge institutional rigidity. And so our answer can't be to build 3,000 more colleges. No one will ever be able to afford that, and we don't have 50 years to do it. So what we need is technological projection of the assets of the teaching and learning and discovery enterprises called universities. We need to be able to project those assets into the workforce, into the families, into the communities, and make these things work. And so here at ASU, in this part of the country, in this American city, we've built that kind of university.
And you just mentioned, use the word enterprises. One of the things that distinguishes your approach to reconsidering what a university is, everything about it, from its physical plant to the things that it offers to the way it conducts its research, is the word enterprise, a distinguishing way of separating us from other universities that might very much see themselves as state agencies, or other private universities that might be, let's call them, more exclusive. Talk about the definition of an enterprise as you would apply it to the work that you're doing here at ASU.
So a public enterprise is an institution owned by the public, serving the public, but operating in an entrepreneurial, highly innovative, high-speed, agile way, not waiting for politics to be the determiner of resources, but using every asset, using every tool, using technologies, using real estate assets, using everything that you've got. And so you act and behave as a private institution would act or behave, but you're not seeking profit, but you're working to benefit the public. So a public enterprise, think of it like a public authority, has a specific mission that it's attempting to accomplish, but it's using the forces of the market to accomplish the public purpose. And so we're operating the university in that modality.
Which would seem, on the surface, to be appealing to those who are questioning the value of universities, it's in the news. The current administration is hammering away at other institutions, as we all know, to suggest that what you're trying to do here is more responsive to the public needs, the public literally by inviting people into the institution who may not have that access elsewhere. Are you finding that what you have done here in the past 20 years is resonating positively with decision makers that might be inclined to think negatively about higher education if they're not thinking through it as thoroughly as you have?
I think it is positive because they're realizing that it's not just a constant, just give me more money, give me more money, give me more money. But it's a system in which the institution works on an entrepreneurial basis where it generates most of the money that it needs. And then it's able to help those people that can't afford with its efficient outcomes that derive a positive margin for reinvestment and things like that. And so I think that the model's been widely accepted and very successful here.
Not only widely accepted and frequently referred to, but really distinguished from other places. And again, going not to a political argument, but the doubt or concerns people have about higher ed, whether it's valuable, whether I should do that as a potential student, or whether I should invest in it as a parent, or whether the government should be investing in it. I think what you're laying out is an alternative that seems highly appealing on a number of fronts. Again, at that level, do you feel like you're getting traction with decision makers?
I think we're getting significant traction. We're getting new kinds of investors. We're getting public investors, private investors, philanthropic investors, partnership investors, technology investors. I mean, it's just a completely different model. And so it allows us to move more quickly, move more with more agility, move with more power, move with more scalability, all those things.
So for those reasons, as you've probably noted, I'm sure, in the local paper here, the Arizona Republic, yet again, there's been a suggestion on the editorial page, why don't we have leaders like yourself thinking the way you just described what you're doing here, running major, let's call them enterprises, at the federal level or in politics? I think I know why you're not doing that, but you have to appreciate the fact that people are acknowledging your leadership and how that might penetrate into the current system we have around governance, which needs some help. It would seem.
Yeah, so we built this new model, this new American university model. It's the most innovative university model in the country. It's a very, very large scale experiment. It needs to work, so I'm focused on making it work. But we do need to now, we more than anything, we need new models, new structures. We can't take 30 years to build a bullet train in California. We can't have new apartments for homeless people in California cost $700,000 or $800,000 each. I mean, and then in Houston, affordable housing costs $400,000 for a unit or less than that. And so we have to find whole new ways to do things where we're driven more by the outcome. So it's easy for us. We're driven by the outcome. The outcome is graduating any qualified student that comes to us from any family background at any income level and finding a pathway ahead for them to be successful. So what we need is new kinds of leaders who are driven by these outcomes, new kinds of structures. You end up with something like the U.S. Department of Education, which was designed by committee over 60 years, was never empowered to operate as an enterprise and became weighted down by rules and procedures and all this other kind of stuff, and then became ineffective. So what we need is, public entities that are working towards the goal that the public wants to achieve, but doing so in ways in which we don't become incapable of making progress because of the political complexity of the operation of the activity, of the goal-seeking activity.
So it's, and I know you're in line with this, it's a revised understanding of what these institutions can be, but not throwing them out whole cloth.
We seek no profit. We have no shareholders. We only have outcomes that we seek. So we're held accountable for our outcomes. But how many high-quality, world-class graduates do we produce? Just under 40,000, and we used to produce 8,000. And our public investment to do that is less than it was then. And so that's just one example of the many things that we're able to do. So
the technological innovation that has come out of universities, that has won wars, that has developed, as you pointed out in your video about the cell phone, technologies that have just become ingrained in our daily lives. We need in universities to continue to do that kind of research.
There's no new technology in the United States, none whatsoever, that doesn't have its roots in academia. And you may not know, the 2,000 academic articles that led to some new rare earth mineral that can expand against a force with just a bolt of electricity going through it, that can do that over and over and over billions of times without ever wearing out. Who invented that then allows you to do something else, that then allows you to do something else? Or who's working on the miniaturization of transistors on microchips so that we can go from one transistor being made that's the size of my finger in 1947 to chips that now will have 100 billion transistors on them in a single iPhone. And so it's all invisible. So we call this. We have to understand the role of the universities in the invisible hand of the future.
Right. So while some people might have some argument with what they perceive universities to be, their structure, maybe some unhappiness about their governance, the need for them to continue to do that kind of work, even when the utilization of that discovery isn't immediately obvious, is absolutely necessary for this country.
It's even more than necessary. It's literally impossible. You can't figure out how to build a fusion power system unless you can build materials that can contain a reaction at the temperatures of the sun, which means you can't use metal, which means you have to use force fields. To make these force fields that then connect up in certain ways, you have to then understand the dynamics of the chemistry of the combustion of the helium, and the hydrogen, in the sun-like thing called the fusion reactor. So you have to create magnetic fields of the scale of a star. How do you do that unless you have massive understanding of materials and technology and the math? So we can't actually go into a star to see how it works. We have to use math to explain how it works. Well, we don't even have the math to explain how all these things work. We have to invent the math. So people don't realize that even math is an invention. Math is an ongoing, continuous invention. I had somebody say to me a couple of years ago, well, there's been no new calculus. Why do we keep teaching calculus as if there's something new? And I said, well, last year there were only 400 major breakthroughs in calculus. 400 new ways to think about three-dimensionality, think about problems, think about how to build models for things you can't see. We can't see your initial cancer manifestation.
Right.
We have to understand it through a form of biological math that we have to create. We can't even model the way a cloud works. It's too complicated.
I think this is exactly why people are looking to you for leadership that isn't just pleading for the preservation of my institution the way it used to be, the construct of the university. Your ability to talk about what universities actually produce at the molecular level, if you will, causes them to say, wow, that really is what universities do. If we could just maintain that and advance that, and we'll figure out the other ways of constructing the institution, but we can't lose what you were just describing.
Yeah, no, we can't, and so we built that here also. So we've been unconstrained. So
right. Well, not many people can manage those two things: the institution itself and the work that comes out of it. So thank you for taking your very limited time to speak to us today. We really appreciate it.